butterfly pose, and this is a reclining butterfly. So to do this, I'm going to elevate my heart a little bit. So if you have something like a pillow that would kind of work, you could use a pillow. If you've got a blanket, you can take your blanket, fold it up a little bit, and roll it so that you've got kind of a longer rolled up section. If you have some yoga blocks, you could put one block under your chest, and then you'd want something still for your head. So you might need one of the other things, unless you have two blocks, and then you can use a block for each. I'm gonna do the blanket today. So the way that I'm gonna set this up is I'm gonna lay the blanket down so that it goes down the length of my spine. I'm gonna kind of make it as close to about 4 or 5 inches as I can get it. That's about the size of a pranayama bolster. Maybe 6 inches is probably closer to reality. So little pranayama bolsters that are made for helping us expand the space of our breathing, those are shaped about like this. And then I'm going to use a little something under my legs as well, just to create the support for my knees, and that's where the little throw pillows can come in. So when you lay down on whatever it is you've got, the blanket for me, I like it to start about where my lowest ribs are. Some people like the blanket to come all the way down to the sacrum, so you can decide what's right for you. And then I want my head a little bit elevated, so I'm going to take this blanket and just fold it a little notch. So I've got just a little bit of an elevation for the head. And then I'm going to put my feet together and drop my knees open like that. Okay, so now I've got a little butterfly shape with the legs. I've got this little pillow there, so it's just the right amount of sensation of stretch kind of in this inner thigh and groin area. And then I'm going to let my arms rest out to the side. So this is going to give me a lift in my chest, a little sense that these muscles that may have been kind of cupped over the computer or over the sewing machine are opening up and making some space. And then we've got this inner thigh, hip position here with the legs. So hopefully a nice amount of sensation. And then we're just gonna stay. So we'll stay for a few minutes. And about every third breath or so, like most of the breaths I'm letting just go where they go. And for me that means that they tend to kind of expand this area of tissue underneath my ribs. Right, navel and the kind of sides of my waist right here. But every third breath or so, I'm restricting just a little bit with my abdominal muscles and pressing the breath or forcing the breath up into my ribs a little bit. And that makes it feel like I can't get quite as deep a breath for me, but it moves my rib cage. And so it helps free up some of the tension that might have developed in the intercostal muscles and also stretches out the chest muscles a little bit. So about every third or fourth breath like that. So I'll invite you to try that out if you like. Notice that my body sort of will start to release in some places, like this little tension that I had across the front of my arm bone. That's letting go, so my arms are a little freer to move out to the side. And so you might find little nuggets of space like that for yourself as well. We're going to stay with this guy for about another minute or so. so do 2 more really big breaths. Now with your exhale, go ahead and bring the knees together. And we're going to just pause for a moment. If you've got anything under your legs, you can slide that out. And then you're going to roll onto one side and slide out whatever was under your back, right? Okay. So, roll back onto your back. And this is the part that I like the best, because sometimes there's this sense that like the blanket is still kind of hanging out there. There's this little impression left behind. And it feels really nice to do a little bit of a rock. I've got my arms up in the air so that I can kind of really access that muscle right along that shoulder blade line. And then you could do little windshield wipers with your legs to sort of release in and around the hip sockets. You can also bring the knees in and with a rounder back get to more of those kind of lower back muscles. And even letting the sacrum kind of ride on the floor and doing a little rock across the sacrum. Oh, that feels good, y'all. Okay, so we're going to go all the way out straight, nice and tall and long. And then we're going to kind of bend like a banana. So we're just going to bend a little bit to the side. So I went to my left. So now my right side is stretching out longer and my left side is curling in a bit. And then I've swung my legs slightly to the left, and you could take your right leg and cross it over your left leg at the ankle. And then as your hip gets heavy into the ground, it'll pull along your IT, at least it does for me, it'll pull along your IT band a little bit more. And if you're kind of tight in this outer hip, just be mindful. We're not, connective tissue is tricky, okay? It does not love aggression. So the thing with yin is that we are trying to put a little bit of stress on our connective tissue in an effort to stimulate what is a hydrating mechanism. So inside of our connective tissue, especially in the fascia that wraps around muscle, but in most connective tissue, there's these types of cells called fibroblasts that produce a substance called hyaluronic acid. Hyaluronic acid pulls water into itself, and it is a hydrating mechanism. It's why they put it in wrinkle creams and other moisturizers, so that when you spread it on the surface of your skin, water flows up to the surface and smooths out all the little lines that you've got. So we're not really trying to unwrinkle our hip, but we are trying to create a kind of hydration, right? If we get too aggressive with the stretches or the poses, then what we actually do is we contribute to damage in that tissue, because connective tissue wants to stay where it is. It doesn't really love to be aggressively pulled on, and generally it will tear, and we're not in the business of doing that. So we just want to feel this kind of little like inkling of sensation. So when I stretch over this way, what do I feel? So I've got like a little light sensation of stretch along the side of my body. That's what I would call it. That's fine. If I'm pulling so hard that I start to feel a really sharp kind of sensation, like my arm bone is really close. So where my arm bone, top of my arm bone, joins in my shoulder joint, that's a joint, right? One bone connects to a different bone. And if at the point where bones connect, I'm feeling anything that feels sharp, numb, tingly, burning, electric, those are problems, okay? Those are damage on the verge. So back off of those sensations. If the sensation is kind of a pleasant stretch, that's where we're headed. We want that stretch. And so we're giving just enough pressure on that tissue to stimulate that hyaluronic acid production, but not so much pressure that we're starting to damage or tear the tissue. And our connective tissue will be happy with us if we're not aggressive. Like, generally speaking, probably life would be happier with us if we were a little less aggressive. But, you know, sometimes that's not always the easiest method. So we're going to hang out here. Now that I've chatted you up, we have one more minute hanging out with this pose. From time to time, I like to give you guys some information, so at least you're informed about how the practice goes, but I also like to leave you alone a little bit. So Come back home to your breath and notice if there's a difference between the right lung and the left lung in terms of the capacity for the breath. So we're going to take one more big breath. And then exhale out a big ah. And meander back to the center with the legs and the torso and the arms, you know, upper body, everything. And then pause for a moment and feel. So this is how we learn whether our practice is good medicine or not good medicine. And this is how we figure it out. So I feel my right side, when I compare it to my left side, it feels a little longer, a little looser, but there's a pleasant sensation, a lighter sensation. Sometimes I refer to it as effervescent. It just, because sometimes there's almost like, the sensation is like the way champagne bubbles like look in a glass. It doesn't feel bubbly, but that's the image that pops into my head when I try to come up with a description for how this feels. Like it feels light and sort of, yeah, not specifically bubbly, but lighter and a sort of upward flow. How's that? So that to me is good medicine sign, right? If when I come out of a shape, I feel like, ooh, like that, oh, there's a little tenderness right there. Or there's places where the connective tissue joins with a bone and that feels tender. Then I was being too aggressive. And so I try to learn from that. All right, so we've had a chance for our spine to kind of change back to its neutral position. So we're gonna try our banana going the other way. So again, move yourself just a little at a time. Maybe you cross the ankle, maybe not today. Just some days I like it, some days I don't. And then allow yourself to settle in. Now, if the sensation that you begin to feel on the side goes completely away, then bend a little bit more, see what happens. But if that sensation never goes away, don't continue to increase, right? You go just to the beginning of sensation. It's like when you're turning on the speaker or the amp, you know, for your stereo or your guitar or whatever you're doing. You don't jam that thing all the way to 10 and strike, you know, the sound up. You want to start out a little low. I'm going to blow your amp here, friends. So we're just, you know, turning it just a little bit, just testing out the sensation. And for me, sometimes I need to like readjust a bone position or readjust a hip position so that there's a sense of kind of release on the side I've already done. Or the side I'm not doing now, anyway. If there's little bony places that feel a little too sharp, move the bones. Or add a pillow, or add a little blanket. Props are nice. Props are your friends. And then we're just breathing. We're going to let gravity and time do the work. This is the magic of yin. Gravity and time. And try to relax into it. Sometimes when we first adjust the body into a yoga pose, the whole nervous system it's almost like it pulls together and lifts us up, like it's trying to pick us up off of a bed of nails. And so the first minute of a yoga pose for me is the minute where my body checks it out and my nervous system decides whether it's going to trust me or not. So I want to be trustworthy, right, of my nervous system. So I'm not being pushy, right? And as I start to feel that sense of relaxation, which happens for me about at the minute or minute and a half mark, where I really feel my body sink in, then at that point, if it feels like I could add on, sure. But otherwise, if I'm still feeling sensation, there's no reason to add, right? If your cup is full, don't pour more in there. Don't take more than your share of this pose. which is a yogic principle called a parigraha, which is not taking more than is the right amount, right, for you. So usually translated as not hoarding, which, yes, it's also part of it. Although we've seen a lot of a certain lack of a parigraha, which in the Sanskrit would be pronounced parigraha. We may have seen some of that lately in the news, or found grocery stores shelves completely empty because of parigraha. But we also practice it inside of our own nature, right? This constant striving or constant attempt to get more is something we should maybe question a little bit. Maybe we're successful enough in this pose and in life. So we've got about another 2 deep breaths here. And then with the exhale, I'm going to just slowly meander my way back to the center. Give it a little movement. And then check in and see where it landed me. And again, I'm feeling, right? So I'm feeling the physical sensation. I'm also noticing, like, what are the things happening with my mind? How's my emotional state? Yeah, because those are all little things that sort of give us inklings into the poses. Poses are not just physical. So if it felt like good medicine, cool. If it didn't, learn from that, right? So that you'll start to sort of shape your practice over time to be your practice, as opposed to whatever I'm inflicting upon you, right? One of the things about the video that I was watching earlier today with people doing several different workouts on YouTube was that one of the comments was, oh, what is she going to do to us, right? And we often think about physicality that way, like, oh, what is my instructor going to do to me? Well, I find that really fascinating. Okay, so we're going to come up to a seated position. And I find it a little problematic, y'all. A little problematic. Because we're not doing things to, right? We're inhabiting our physical form. And we're inhabiting our physical form in some fashion, whether that's what we're doing now, which is yoga practice, conscious awareness, or we're running, or we're walking, or climbing trees, or whatever you do for physical fun, riding a bike. We're inhabiting our body as it moves through space, or as it hangs out. And so, I don't know, it's an interesting trip, little like trip of the tongue. Okay. So what I've done is I have positioned a blanket under my knees. I've put my legs out in a V, but not as wide as I can. I'm just being a tiny bit conservative with my joints. I'm 50. I've discovered that 50-year-old joints like to be treated differently than 30-year-old joints and 20-year-old joints, so I'm doing a little different thing. And then I'm finding the sit bones, right? So I want to feel these bony protrusions on the bottom of my pelvis so that I'm perched up on the edge of those. Some of us are going to want to put a blanket or a pillow underneath our hips so that the hips are elevated, and then we'll be able to find those bones. Now, all we're going to do for now is we're just going to turn towards one leg and then rest the arms. Now, I have short arms. I'm built like Tyrannosaurus Rex, in case that hasn't become obvious. I've got a big tail, I got big, strong legs, and I've got a really big mouth. And tiny little arms. So I like to have a couple blocks just so it gives me some place to plant my arms. And then I'm just pausing. So there's an inclination when I twist this way for me to lift this hip up off the floor. So what I'm trying to do is allow that hip to stay, allow my spine to stay neutral in terms of, like wherever its curves would naturally wind up over the bowl of my pelvis, and also this rotation. And then can I sink into that once I get the bones arranged? Can I allow my legs to relax, allow the bowl of my pelvis and my spine to just hold each other up? So we're going to stay here for about 45 more seconds. Sometimes there's a tendency for me to want to lead with my head, so I'm being really conscious of leading with my heart. That might also be a metaphor. Not to bombard you with metaphors, but it could be. So we're going to take a nice big breath. And with your exhale, we're going to fold over this front leg. So we're just going to come in over here. Now here's the options you have. You can fold forward like I've done here, where mostly for me this has now become a song about the hamstrings on the back of this thigh and this inner thigh over here. So I'm feeling feeling a nice spiciness in those places. Not too much, just the right amount. We're going for that Goldilocks position. But you could also turn a little bit more and make this a sideways bend with the arm or without the arm involved, right? So now the spine is involved and it's not just about the legs and the hips. So that's really up to you. Try both. And what I'm gonna do, because we're gonna stay for about 3 minutes and we're just shy of 30 seconds or so into this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hang out here for a minute. And then I'm gonna switch it. So for about 1.5 minutes, I'm gonna do this, and then for about 1.5 minutes, I'm gonna do the side bend. Now I'm sort of enjoying the sensation of stretch because I just switched my pose around. So I'm enjoying the sensation of stretch along the side of my neck, but it's feeling a little on the spicy side. So when it feels a little too spicy, you add support, right? So I'm going to put my hand here so that I can rest my head in my hand. And then I have this little bit of support. Now maybe your elbow doesn't touch your thigh, so you stick something in there to give yourself a little bit of support, a little height. I'm letting this arm just rest here. I could take it over my ear, but it feels nice to let this area between my chin and my shoulder release a little bit away from each other. Okay. So we're inside our last minute here. So we're going to take a really big breath. So I'm going to first support my head, then I'm going to use my opposite arm to kind of help me get up. And then once I'm all the way up, my spine still feels like it's bending the way I was just bending. So I'm going to take a moment. You can lean back, you can bend your knees, give your legs a little rinse. Oh, give your spine a little back and forth cat shapes, kind of. Now, pause for a moment until it feels like everything comes back to neutral, and it's also a chance for you to feel, what am I doing here? Like how's my body feeling? And then all we're gonna do is do the twist. So I'm gonna try to keep my pelvis nice and stable. I'm just gonna rotate my spine, find the position that my arms wanna rest in. And try to keep the sit bones nice and heavy so I'm not leaning into off the sit bone. And then just pause and let everything sink in. Take nice deep breaths. Alright, yogis, we're going to take a big inhale and fold over this leg. So you might go forward or sideways or some of each. So again, you're just noticing, make little adjustments if anything feels stitchy or funky. You might even bend one knee if it needs to be bent a little bit more, put a pillow under it. So just allowing yourself to have whatever little modifications are right for you. So I'm just going to shift this thing over to my side so that I'm just adding that little bit of extra shape, just that little shape for my spine. So we did the banana, which is very similar to this. This just changes the sensation because it's just the spine and not as much of my outer hip. And there's still a little bit of other things happening. But it's up to you. You decide on your own what versions of these poses are right. If you're not sure, try them and then go with the one that you like the best. And so we're inside of our last minute here. So we're going to take 2 more breaths. Nice big inhale. Hold that in, come all the way up. You're going to make whatever little movements would feel good. Lean back, bend your knees. Move your legs a little bit. All right, yogis. That is a half an hour of yin yoga. Now, you have a couple of options for continuing your practice should you wish to. You could, this is a great moment to do some seated meditation. So you can put yourself in your favorite little meditation cushion or chair and or on the floor and chill, just relax and be present for how you landed in this moment. You could do shavasana. You could stretch out on your back and lay down on the floor and do that, right? It's like meditation, but laying down. Just be present for your experience. Or you can go get yourself some lunch. It depends on how long you've got as a lunch break. But thank you for joining me for a little yin yoga lunch break. Have a great rest of your day. Namaste, yogis.